and welcome to The Row Well. We are Bridget and Loren, and we are thrilled to have you with us. Today, we're going to start talking a little bit about pivoting into resilience. What in the world is that? We've heard the word, but what does it really mean and how does it apply to all of us? Hold on tight. We'll discuss that. We're so glad you're joining us, and maybe you are dusting those living room pictures, and if you're doing it, stop over and do mine because I won't. Maybe you're pulling onions so you can start making salsa. You might just be chasing the hogs, getting them back in the pen. Whatever it might be, we know that the ag industry has its challenges, but we're right alongside you, and we cannot wait to connect and inspire one generational legacy to the next. All right, Loren, pivoting into resilience. What does that mean?
Oh, so cool. It's interesting that word resilience, we're using it all the time. People are talking about having resilient finances and having a resilient family and having, a mental health resilience and all of these different terms that are connecting to the word resilience. But I don't know if we really have a good idea of what resilience means. When you think about resilience, what pops into your head?
To me, it means that no matter how many times you get knocked down, you get back up.
It's interesting because the definition for resilience, it absolutely sucks in my view. It says something to the effect of an ability to bounce back quickly. I think it's a lie because we don't bounce back quickly from things. When my brother and sister-in-law, their son, Mikhail, passed away at the age 4.5. And somebody's telling me that resilience for them looks like bouncing back quickly. No.
Well, two things there. One, it doesn't have to be quickly. To me, resiliency means that you can come back in time. And that level of comeback is entirely up to you. In the case of your family, if you've lost a child, your resiliency will never bring you back to where you were before. Your whole picture has changed.
And I think that's where we bring in that idea of pivoting, that resilience isn't going back to where we were. In fact, we don't always want to go back to the way things are. I mean, that's comfortable. Yeah, I get that. If life was all Skittles and sunshine with a Smurf party, yeah, you want to go back to it. But that's not a reality. And if we keep looking back and longing, I was listening to Lisa Harper a while ago, and she was talking about how we romanticize the past. We need to not do that. Resilience does not mean that we look to the past and we come back to this magical place in the past. Resilience means we're willing to pivot, we're willing to learn new skills, and we're learning to apply things differently. That's resilience. And resilience applies to our mental health, but it relies to a lot of other things as well.
So resiliency, when you said that, you don't have to bounce back to what it was. I hear people say, oh, the good old days. You know what the good old days was? Washing your clothes beating them on a rock. That's not necessarily the good old days because I have a washing machine right now that's doing that for me. It's okay for resiliency to change when you pivot back. It's okay for it to be your new norm, I think is maybe a good permission that we can give people. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is because I think what we don't understand in the world where everybody is championing resilience, there's actually a dark side of resilience. And I see this in ag community all the time. You see, the dark side of resilience means we stop feeling. We just work harder, try harder, put our boots on the ground, and we go back and we do it over and over and over again. And that leads to burnout. And yet somehow in our world, we've convinced ourselves that that's what resilience looks like. And the problem, of course, with that is that's a dark side resilience. True resilience looks like this. I'm able to be vulnerable with the people closest to me because I know they're going to support me. I know that we're going to come up with a plan together and we're going to figure out a solution to this through pivoting, through change, or through a different practice. But the dark side of resilience is evident in our ag community. Remember in a couple of episodes, we talked about ruggers where we just kind of lift up the rug and we sweep things under, and that's what resilience looks like to some people. And that's not resilience. But because there's no vulnerability, because there's no willingness to even say, wow, this is really taking a lot from me. And I don't have I can't keep up this pace. We just sweep under all the hurt, and we sweep under all the demands. And so when we talk about resilience and how to be resilient, number one is we've got to learn to be learners. We've got to learn to say, how do I need to look at this differently? Who else can I talk to try and catch an eye here? Who else can be on my team? Because what's going on is not working.
Tell me if I'm right or wrong. Maybe this is a gray area. Those who say, but I am resilient, might be masking it with drugs or alcohol. True resiliency probably means that you have to face sobriety too.
It is the stats are really alarming when it comes to the amount of alcohol use in rural North America. Mm-hmm. In fact, Canada has a higher per capita consumption than the US, higher in the entire Western Hemisphere. And so our rural communities, both in Canada and the US, are using alcohol as a normative way of dealing with stress. And it is causing
greater issues.
Many, many issues within families, within individuals. And I think, Bridget, what we have to understand is alcohol use is a normative function in our rural communities. Normative meaning we've made it normal, but that doesn't mean it's healthy. And I think about all the agriculture conferences I go to, and quite often, there's alcohol served, and alcohol in and of itself is not the problem. The problem is we come to lean on it to deal with all of the stress and all of the anxiety that we're experiencing. And so you're right. Sometimes people think they're being resilient because they've gotten through the day, but it took a kegger to get through it. It's a problem.
Absolutely. And I think that when it comes to that resiliency, if you come through whatever's been in front of you, if you come through that and you feel that you've become resilient, and if coming through that meant that you are now sober, it can be another difficult place to be because you've been resilient. You've decided that sobriety is something that you need, and others might not be as supportive as you want them to be.
Yeah. And that's a very challenging place because of our culture within agriculture. It can be very lonely to be sober. And so, resilience looks different for different people, but in some of those situations, that actually comes back down to boundaries and setting some boundaries on relationship, setting some boundaries on who we surround ourselves. There's this really amazing quote. I wish we had it at our fingertips, but it basically talks about we become that which we surround ourselves with. So surround yourself with good. And it was really actually a quote I had heard recently, but really it speaks to if you surround yourself with the right people, you are so much more likely to become the person you seek to become. You're so much more likely to accomplish the goals you seek to accomplish. You're so much more likely to feel happy and excited and fulfilled simply because of the people you choose to surround yourself with.
I think that applies to the fact that if you believe that you are resilient, having others around you that support that is so important. Pivoting into that resilience, like you said, Loren, making sure that you are positive. And to me, resiliency means that I've come through whatever I had to, and I can face it with a smile on my face.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we need to kind of define the word pivot. What do we mean when we talk about pivot? Because, when I think of pivot, I think about basketball, where you've got one foot planted and you pivot around that one foot, right? And right. I think we might be referring to something a little bit different than that. In other words, if I have been raising sheep and it is taking everything out of me because I can't afford to hire any support, and I might have to pivot. I might have to sell the sheep and, go into a different area of agriculture. That is a really big ask. That's very scary. And yet, that is what resilience looks like. Pivoting means we can alter our course. We can keep one foot planted. I'm still committed to our farm. I'm still committed to being a farmer and to living off this land and raising my family in my rural community on this 5th generation farm, whatever it is. So you can still keep that one foot planted, but you can change your vision and direction, and you can realign that vision and your mission statement. Hopefully all of you listening have a vision for your farm and have a mission statement for your farm. It's very important that we know where we're going. Those are not carved in stone. We can reevaluate those. We can rewrite them, and we can figure out what our overall goal is and how we're going to accomplish that.
So really, we shouldn't look at resiliency just in an emotional standpoint, but it really in a physical and economical, because maybe resiliency is changing to a no-till on your farm. Maybe it is suddenly you are selling dairy cattle, and what will you do differently after that livestock enterprise leaves the farm? Mm-hmm. Resiliency may also be that your kids have grown up and moved out of the house. And how does that resiliency pivot in your life? So it's a great point.
To embrace it. We have to be willing to embrace it. It's okay. In fact, I was talking to a couple dairy farmers, and frankly, they're selling their cows and gonna go get a job in town. I don't want that for any farmers. I get that. That's not an easy place to be. In fact, it's incredibly painful. But that's resilience. It doesn't mean that is where the story ends. It means that this is what I'm doing for now in order to keep the farm for now. You know, we go through cycles in agriculture. And so resilience means I'm willing to evaluate, I'm willing to make the changes that are needed in order to get to the goal that we're looking for.
I have a friend who, her resiliency was when her oldest daughter was entering her senior year of high school, grade 12. And my friend was very concerned. She would say things such as, well, this is the last time I'll have homecoming. This will be the last time we're doing this. And I stopped her one day and said, you are putting an awful lot of pressure on your daughter to live vicariously through her for her senior year. What if you approach this as exciting as it was when you decided to graduate from high school and move to college? Remember that joy that you had? Give her that joy. And she got back to me after graduation and said, you're right. We enjoyed her year so much more if we simply took it as a positive, not a negative. And that can be a resiliency too, I think, in her case.
It's so interesting because what you're really speaking to there is changing our mindset. And when we take our unhelpful thoughts and we make them be helpful, we change the outcome for it. And so, you know, that is probably one of the number one resilient skills a person can have is how can I view this through a different lens? Absolutely. Loss is painful for those of you who have, lost your generational farm or, life looks bleak right now. You don't think you're going to be able to pay your bills. There's nothing easy about that. It's incredibly painful. But you have the ability to change how you view this. And if you can change how you view it, you change the outcome of it.
Yes, absolutely. Your views are what matters, the positive outlook that you can have. Maybe that's the thing that I want people to get most out of our discussions on this podcast, Loren. I want them to feel some hope and gain some positivity.
Yeah. I think all of it comes down to, when we talk about resilience, all of it comes down to understanding your own value. There was a time when I worked with a young woman who the world would say she had the world by her fingertips or by the tail. She was captain of, her rugby team. She was the soloist in the band. She was the valedictorian. She was super uber smart. And quite frankly, physically beautiful, like magazine beautiful.
Aw.
And she sat in my office and tears were streaming down her face as she cried and said, my life is not worth living. And I said, has anyone ever told you that you're precious? Has anyone ever told you that you have inherent value? And she said, no, no one's ever told you that. You see, folks, all of resilience comes down to this understanding of the fact that you have inherent value. You belong. This world is richer because you're in it. And so to be resilient, we have to grasp that fact. We have to understand that there's purpose to our life. We're not accidents. We are not here because the sun is shining one day and not the next. You have value. And so if that's you that's listening, Bridget and I want you to know that you belong, you have value. And resilience is the outcome of understanding that truth.
You know, to go back to our last episode where we talked about giving help when it might not be wanted. Accept that help. Accept that you have value and that you are precious, just as you told your friend, Loren. It's hard for many people to get that thought in their heads. They feel that they don't have that purpose. But boy, they do. And I don't think you can repeat that statement enough for others. I really don't.
And so, Bridget, we're going to kind of shift gears here. And I think about when we shift gears, how in line that is with resilience, right? Like pivoting. Sometimes we kind of shift gears. And so, folks, here is the quote. As most of you, if you've listened to this podcast a couple times, we like to do this segment called Catch a Phrase. And we're going to share a quote and kind of see what we think it might mean between the two of us. You're going to see if Bridget and I have kind of the same feeling or belief behind it, or if how it resonates with us. But we really invite you to get involved. We're going to post this phrase on our Facebook page or on our social media. And we invite you to weigh in on what you think about this quote. It's taken by Kincaid. No matter how much falls on us, we keep plowing ahead. That's the only way to keep the roads clear.
Okay. When I first listened to that quote, my thought is we keep plowing ahead. We put our heads down because we are resilient. We can get through this and it'll all be better. But after you say that, two things come to mind. One is we don't have to do it alone. Maybe there's someone else with another shovel to help us plow so that we can get ahead. Mm-hmm. And we may have pivoted to our newfound resilience. We may have chosen a new path that someone's helping us plow open, and that we don't just have to push through. We don't just have to put our heads down and force something to happen. We can accept help.
Yeah.
And we can find a new norm that's better.
You know, Bridget, have you seen that movie Ordinary Angels?
Not yet.
Oh, it's worth it. And this is a totally shameless plug. I have no affiliation with the movie at all, but it amazes me because these are families, both of the individuals who kind of come together for the good of this little girl, this little girl who lost her mom to, I think it was cancer. She passed away. And then this hairdresser who had an addiction to alcohol. And as we mentioned earlier, that's, known in our agriculture community. And part of her, kind of treatment was to pour herself into caring for someone else. And this little girl had tremendous health issues. And so in the end, needed a transplant. And it took place either maybe Michigan or Wisconsin or something like that. And so in the middle of the winter, in the middle of a snowstorm, sure enough, she gets the call that it's time and they need to get her, up to the hospital to get this. And against all odds, and I'm telling you, all odds, the father tried to drive her to the airport, everything was closed down. But somehow in the middle of it, they figure out how they can get a helicopter to land in this area. But the helicopter can't see where to land. And so what ends up happening is all the neighbors show up with their shovels and they shovel an area for this helicopter and they shine their car lights. They all get together and they put their cars around. They shine their car lights as to where to land. And I think, wow, is that not true resilience. If this dad had been trying to do it on his own, it would have failed.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way that he would have been able to shovel that whole area by himself. There's absolutely no way that he would have been able to shine enough cars to show where to land. It took a community of people to make a difference in that little girl's life. And so our agriculture communities are strong. We have a lot of what we call social capital. We care deeply about one another. We're willing to help one another out. We're terrible at asking for help, as we've talked before. But the idea in this quote that said, you just need to kind of keep plowing on. It's the only way to keep the roads clear. Not really. Part of the way you can keep the road clear is by asking for help, be vulnerable with one another, and then teaming up with other people. I think we actually do ourselves a great disservice when we think all I have to do is put my head down and keep going, because that leads to burnout. We're not better off because of it.
The whole discussion that we just had about what it takes to have all these people around us and a movie that had an impact leads me to that one last question for you. And it just kind of happened today, but if you're considering all the big screen movies that you've seen, including most recent, which one, Loren, do you believe had the greatest emotional impact on you?
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, I don't know it over my whole life. I can't say over my whole life, because probably Little House on the Prairie growing up, I just loved it. And I loved Little House on the Prairie. I don't know why, but it was always, and even as my kids, every time a storm came, we'd all gather around and watch Little House on the Prairie. But interesting enough, just last night, I've watched a number of movies lately that have really been heart pulls. One of them was One Life, which is the story of the gentleman who rescued Jewish children from Czechoslovakia. Just an incredible story. And his view on it was, what if we can just save one? Hence the title, One Life. And I think that's part of the basis of this podcast. Not that we would save people's lives, but what if somehow our podcast gave one person hope? What if this podcast gave one person a sense of enlightenment or an understanding or an ability to try a different skill or to get curious, all of those pieces. So that movie really resonates with me. The other one was, I watched a movie last night. It's new on Disney, and I think it's Women of the Sea. I should know of the title, but I'm notoriously terrible for titles. But she's the woman who crossed the English Channel swimming, the first woman to cross the English.
Oh, yes.
Great movie, by the way. But what really spoke to me was the father all the way along was like, I'm a butcher. Girls can't do that, and so it was the mother who kind of went behind the dad's back and kind of, okay, here's your swimming lessons. And he's like, I won't pay for it. So she started sewing bows and it was enough to pay for it. And, this mom was really kind of quietly the neck to the head kind of scenario when we talk about My Big Fat Greek Wedding. She was really just quiet, this quiet strength. It was really kind of beautiful. But in the end, when the father found out that, his daughter had been kind of sabotaged in her desire to cross the English Channel, he came and he apologized and said, I should have been here cheering you on from day one. And so sure enough, he does everything he can to cheer her on. And in the very end, releases her to that dream. The boat couldn't go with her because she had to swim through the Narrows. And so he had to be okay with the fact that there's a good chance she's going to die. And I had to release her to that dream. I had an amazing relationship with my dad. So this isn't anything to do with my dad and my relationship, but it really spoke to that meaningful relationship and how precious it was for him to release her to that. So there you go. That's one of I just watched it last night. Next week I'd have a completely different answer, I'm sure.
That's okay. When I read that question, my gut reaction was going back in time to a movie called Fried Green Tomatoes, and took place in the southern states of the U.S. Back in I think it was in the 30s into the 40s, 1930s, 1940s. And the thing that struck me was there was evil in their midst. And they worked together, although maybe not in the most upstanding way. But they worked together to remove that evil. They worked as a community to protect their own. But it also showed me how strong women could be. They could take on roles that were unexpected, and they could do things that no one else was thinking of. That was one of the ways that I learned that I could do a lot in this life. Interesting enough, that's probably going to lead us to one of our upcoming podcasts about women, and they told us we could do anything, but they never told us we had to. So I look forward to that, and I hope that we continue to provide resources and expertise and ideas for those who need them most out there at the Rural Well.
Thanks so much, folks. See you next time. Hey, folks. We are so glad that you joined us on the Rural Well, and we hope that you found a nugget of wisdom in our chat today. But listening to our podcast is a drop in the bucket if you are struggling. So we encourage you to reach out in whatever way you are able to ensure that you get the help that you need to thrive. If at any time you are in crisis and cannot keep yourself safe or your loved one safe, please call 911 or visit your nearest hospital. We are delighted that you chose to spend your time with us, and we want to hear from you. So drop us a note and be sure to tune in next time to the Rural Well, and remember, you were made to thrive.